Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jane Cherry from the Cooperative and Policy Alternative Centre. We are an active partner in the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign. And together, COPAC and SATSI are bringing you this workshop series on how to grow your own food and start your household food garden. So this is the third of 4 workshops that we will be hosting. All the previous workshops have been recorded and are available for viewing on Facebook and on YouTube. And in today's workshop, we're going to look at Indigenous knowledge and the commons. And our final workshop next week will look at how to maintain your garden and also an introduction to agroecology. So just to note that this is only phase 1 of 3 phases in our education program. So stick with us. In our next phase, we're going to look at how we can close the loop. So looking at topics such as composting, water management, and stuff like that. I'm just going to go through some of the housekeeping. So it is there on my screen, which I've shared with you. Firstly, please remember to use the chat. We can't take any hands. So if you have any comments or questions along the way, please write them in the chat. We are streaming live on Facebook. So if you get kicked out of this Zoom call for some reason, please join on Facebook at SA Food Sovereignty. We are recording all the workshops and we have been uploading them to YouTube, and we've also been uploading them. They are already on our Facebook page. And then we've managed to put together an agroecology advice panel. We have 3 experts who are willing to take your questions at any time over WhatsApp. So if you do need someone to talk to as you are setting up your garden, please send me an email, or you can send us a DM on Facebook or Twitter, and we will send you those contacts. And then just a reminder to follow COVID safety guidelines. So we are doing this workshop during the COVID pandemic. We have put out some tools on how to follow safety guidelines, which you can see at this link. This is what these guidelines looks like. Safety guidelines for food growers. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that for now. Now, just to note that we've done some pre-recordings for our speakers today because we have had issues in the past. So all 3 speakers have been pre-recorded. Vishwas, who is from COPAC, he will present to us last. He will try join us because he has some other engagements, but hopefully he'll be with us at the end to answer some questions. And the other 2 speakers is John Nzira, who we all know, and then Method Kundzidza from Earth Law Foundation. Okay, I'm going to start right away with the recordings.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot to COPAC for organizing this string of workshops and for asking me to speak about indigenous knowledge in the context of food, agroecology, and ecology, and all that that speaks to our main topics. And in doing so, I want to show you something. I cannot speak about indigenous knowledge and practice without talking about this. I'm holding a small seed here of Soboda. This is an indigenous seed that's grown in Bikita, Zimbabwe, where I come from. I'll also show you some varieties of maize, and these are actually from my garden. Here is one. Here's another one. You can see it's yellow with some purple stripes there and a bit of white. And you can also see this is white maize. These are all from my garden here in Johannesburg. And I'll show you the last variety, which is like rotten maize. I've got other seeds, different ones like groundnuts that I have here, which I can't show you properly because I can't hold them in the palm of my hand. But what I want to say is I cannot talk about indigenous knowledge and practice without talking about seed, because at the very core of indigenous knowledge and practice is the seed. So when I showed you this, I will challenge you to imagine something. Look at this seed. Imagine who was the first person to even think that this would be processed into food. Who could it have been? Where could that have been? What did the land where it happened look like? What was there on that land? And when they did eventually found out and decided this was seed to plant and eat, when they planted and harvested, where did they store this? And I'll show you. Some of these seeds have been stored in clay pots in ancient times. They have been stored in caves. I'm talking here a long time ago. Some of these that are branchy like this have even been stored just ordinarily up a tree, on the branches of a tree. I'm talking about this because at the core of indigenous knowledge is the seed. It's the seed that defines what people eat, what people grow and eat, where they store it, and how people then connect with their land. Now I know that my colleagues are going to talk about the food commons, but I thought in this session, I could also reflect a bit on the commons more generally. By this, I mean the idea that within a particular context, community, the commons defines the sharedness of things, the commonality of things. When, for example, people go to the river to bath, animals go to the river to drink water, birds go there too, different insects like bees go there too. This community of life, which then becomes the commons more generally. And I'm going there and going there from seed to the commons. The reason I'm doing this in the context of what I'm talking about is seed. When you look at seed, it's a grain today. It's a plant tomorrow. It's a flower the other day. It's a fruit the next day. Before it comes back to become seed and food again. Now, I challenged you at the beginning to say, when you look at this seed, who do you imagine as having even imagined or started thinking about it as food? And in that context, I'm drawing you back into ancestry. The seed moved through ancestry from the first peoples that domesticated it, passed over generations, and today I hold it in my hand. It has gone through those cycles of seed, plant, flower, fruit, seed, back into the ground, out of the ground, into the granary, doesn't this make seed become, number one, our ancestor? Because it tells the story of where it's been to, in terms of the people who had it, in terms of the land where it was grown, in terms of the various places, the caves, the storage facilities where it's been, how it beautified the land when it became a plant and it became a flower. Seed becomes our ancestor in that regard. But it's there physically today. We can see it, we can experience it. And in it lies the potential of the future. Seed transcends the spectrum of ancestry into today, into the future. This is why indigenous knowledge and practice understands the connectedness of ancestry to present day and to the future. And this is why indigenous peoples devised ways to honor, to recognize and honor ancestors. Because they are there, they are visible. As I've shown you, that this becomes like an ancestor and is a member of the family today, just like me. And in it is a potential of the future to become member of future families to emerge from today going forward. Ancestry, family, indigenous knowledge, which in itself is tied up to the land, to the cosmos, to everybody who lives on the land, with whom people share life. So, indigenous knowledge, for me, defines that knowledge system that acknowledges the relationships of life in a piece of land. Life, wherever it is, in whatever form it is. Now, there are different rituals, ceremonies that are held in different contexts by different people. But I would like to share with you one in my place, which is called Matatenda or Matapona in my local language, which basically defines the ritual or the ceremony of first fruits, where after growing and the plants have given first fruits, the elders and the spiritual leaders take the first fruits before they eat. They take them up the mountains. They don't give them to anybody. They leave them on the ground to honor the ancestors. They leave them there to allow insects, animals, and everybody else living on the mountains to eat first, to acknowledge that for that food to have been there, so many other participants did what they did. The bees came, the monkeys were there, the rains came, the trees were there, and they all form part of the community that contributed to the production of the food, even though it was in the field where the person weeded and where the person cultivated. But all those other characters I've mentioned, they were there to make the food possible. They honor and leave it there for all those other beings to eat first before human beings eat. Talk of understanding the interconnectedness. at the center of indigenous knowledge. This is what I'm saying. So when we talk about indigenous knowledge and practice, we are faced with the risk of seeing this as being something maybe sexy or trendy, fashionable, like these days. There is a lot of reference to indigenous knowledge at various forums. And for us, mainly in the NGO sector, this is something that we use to raise funds a lot. But I would like to say to you that indigenous knowledge is not trendy and fashionable. This is a deep and authentic understanding of how life works in all its forms. And after understanding that, number one, acknowledge it. Number two, honor it. And lastly, participate genuinely. So, indigenous knowledge and practice at the center of holding, participating in life and all its various forms is what I meant to speak to you about today. And as I've said, I wouldn't have shared that without showing how at the center of all this is the seed, which I showed you here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Today we are going to talk about, we are going to share about indigenous food to Africa. And we are going to look at what are indigenous foods to plant in our garden or to take care of them in the forest or in the field or in the fields, natural fields or natural forests. And we look at also the benefits of these indigenous plants and of course how to plant them, maintain, and where we can source seeds. Maybe as an introduction is that in Africa, before maybe colonization or before we learn about the Western type of life, local people have been using their traditional or indigenous plants to provide nutrition for the family, to provide the wide variety of food that they require for the family. Hence, they protected themselves from diseases, they protected themselves from ailments, and they keep themselves healthy for a long time, and they live longer, and mainly they were surviving from the indigenous plants of Africa. So it means that we can still survive, we can still live better if we use or utilize the indigenous species or indigenous plants that we found in our own countries or in the continent of Africa. Remember, there were no hospitals, but people were surviving and getting all they require for certain diseases, for certain needs they require from the forest. So at the same time, these plants were, some of them were grown by the traditional, our ancestors, and some of them were just collected from the forest, like going out in the forest and do the collection of these seeds, collection of the leaves, collection of the fruits, collection of different kind of vegetables to help the family. In particular, I also grew up eating or enjoying the traditional food in that my parents used to go out and with me to harvest them and bring them home and survive from all these traditional foods. The traditional foods may be categorized in different levels, but I'm going to explain step by step of the traditional foods that communities and families have been utilizing. Let me start with the leaf vegetables. The leaf vegetables, mainly, they are into different groups. Some of them, people have been growing, or traditional, or our forefathers have been growing this in their fields or mixed with the crops that they are growing for crops for cash. And some of them, they are naturally found in the field, and some of them, they grew as weeds. And even now, some crops, they can grow as weeds in our farms. But it is important to know what crops are those and what vegetables are those. So the leaf vegetables includes African spinach, which is amaranth. And African spinach, it has a different variety. There are different varieties that you can find in African spinach. Some of them, they grow tall to about a meter or a meter and a half. And some of them, they creep on the ground like they are ground covers. And some of them, they grow medium size. But traditionally, we eat the leaves as vegetables. And when we eat the leaves as vegetables, we prepare them like the way we do with spinach, or you mix them with peanut butter, or you cook them with the peanut oils or sesame oils. So we prepare to eat them as relish with the pap or with sadza. And when we do this, the crop itself, the vegetable itself, it has lots of minerals, lots of nutrients, lots of iron and vitamins. And this crop, it is easy to grow. You can grow it with maize, you can grow it with the other vegetables, or usually it's a voluntary crop that just germinates in your field. Then you need to know it and then leave it in the field so that you will benefit out of it. The other crop that it grows as a weed in our farms is blackjack. Blackjack, it is a crop that is normally used as a weed, and it grows in the veggies or edges of the field. It has some spike seeds. And the blackjack, you use the leaves for relish. You prepare it like spinach, but the blackjack, you can first boil it and then throw out the first water and then prepare it as relish, because it has some strong chemicals that is produced, natural chemicals that's produced, and it has some bitterness in it. So to remove the bitterness, it is good to throw out the first water and then prepare it with peanut butter and other mix. We can also grow or have African cabbage, which is cleome or spider plant. The spider plant grows also naturally, it just voluntarily germinates, and it can grow with any other crops. As it grows, you use the young leaves, you harvest the leaves, or you dry the leaves, and then you cook them and prepare as relish. It is a plant that is commonly found in Africa, in our fields, as a weed. But you can grow it for the local markets. You can grow it for saving it, preserving it for the future use. nightshade. Nightshade is also a weed, but it is a traditional and indigenous crop that can be grown in our fields, and it can be used as relish. We have a wild thistle that's like milk thistle, which is one of the plant that is very good for your heart and for your liver, and it is very good because of the milk that it produces. So, but we can use it as a vegetable. We harvest it in the field. It is grown with another crop, and it is a voluntary weed that grows in the field. Chickweed also, it's a plant that can be grown in the field, and it is to grow the chickweed. It is a natural plant that can grow in the field, and it is a plant that voluntarily grows, and you can use the leaves and the seeds and also the flower as vegetables. Pumpkin leaves, as you grow pumpkin, the leaves are edible. You prepare them as spinach, and they're easily grown in our communities. We can also use wild cucumber or prickle cucumbers, which we can grow and use it, the leaves, as vegetables. We can use sweet potato leaves as vegetables, and the sweet potato leaves are you can easily grow them, and you find them you can grow them from cuttings, like the runner of a sweet potato, and then you can plant it into the field. We can use the moringa leaves as vegetables, and the moringa is a tree, but you can grow it from seedlings, and then when it's giving you wide variety of the leaves or the biomass, then you can use the leaves to prepare them as vegetables. Fat hen, it's a weed as well, and it's a traditional crop, vegetable. It grows as natural in the field, and then we can use it as vegetables. Dandelion, it also grows in our fields as a vegetable, but it generally grows as a weed in the field, and it can be used as vegetables. We can also use cowpeas leaves. The cowpeas are bean legume plant and can be used as the leaves. You harvest them and prepare them, or you dry them and use them, you preserve them and use them as vegetables, mix it with peanut butter, and it's very delicious vegetable. We also, these are the vegetables that we can use in our garden, and these vegetables, they are commonly found as weeds, and they are traditional vegetables for our families. The cereals and grains, we can grow finger millet, and finger millet, it's a crop that is easily grown in dry areas. In cold areas, it also grows. It is an indigenous crop in Africa, but one time I found also people in Japan that are growing it, so it can also grow in high velds. So from low veld to high veld, it can grow. But this is a traditional crop that we have been using and growing, and as a means of providing the pap, or providing the carbohydrates to their family. Pearl millet, it is a millet that is similar to finger millet, but the texture and the growth of it is different from finger millet. Finger millet, it's a dwarf, it can grow maximum of maybe 90 centimeters, but pearl millet can grow tall to about 1.5 meters or 2 meters. And it is a crop that is easy to grow, but you need to control birds. They like it so much. You need to control birds out of it. Foxtail millet. It is a millet that is traditionally grown in Africa, and it is a plant that is easy to grow and produce quite a lot in per square meter. And sorghum, also commonly grown in South Africa. We can grow sorghum to provide meal for pap. And also sesame, we can grow sesame in South Africa, and it will also provide us with the grain that we require, or cereal that we require for the family. Or we can also grow maize. Maize is not traditional to Africa, but it has been naturalized, or it's now a traditional crop, because nowadays it is a staple food. But we don't need to grow the GMO maize. We need to grow the traditional maize, like the red maize, the yellow maize, the purple maize, that originally came from Mexico to Africa. And that traditional maize, we still have it in our communities, and we can still grow that. And it is an easy crop to grow. And most of these cereals and grains, it is better to prepare them for food, as it's better to ferment them in a preparation for food, because when you ferment, you are bringing the microbes into the food. You are bringing the good food for our body that can resist us to resist diseases and viruses that can attack us. For fruits, we have wide variety of fruits that we can grow as traditional crops or indigenous crops. We have a variety of pumpkins, variety of melons, watermelons, calabash, tomatoes. We have wide variety of cucumbers that we can grow. Fruits also, we can grow fruit trees like amarula, red milkwood, mobola plum, K apple, nam nam, mango orange, baobab. These we can grow these trees in the boundary of our farms, and they can provide fruits for the family. The proteins, mainly legumes, we can grow them, pulses and nuts, like cowpeas, mbambara nuts, jugo beans. Mbambara nuts is same as jugo beans. Lab beans. We can grow pigeon pea. We can grow peanuts, some they call groundnuts, and these, they can provide us with good proteins for the family. We can grow plants like amaranthus for fats, and sesame for fats, peanuts for fats or peanut butter, and we can grow fiber and refuges from amadumbe, from cassava, sweet potatoes, wide variety of yams, and the yams can be white yams, purple yams, Livingstonia potatoes. These are traditional crops. And we can grow also plants for vitamins and minerals, which include for hot drinks like tea, or for cold drinks. We can grow plants like wormwood. These, they are natural plants, they are traditional indigenous plants. The wormwood family, the resurrection plants, wild raka, wild rosemary, Kenza bush, fennel. These are indigenous plants that we can have in our fields to provide teas and coffee. For coffee, mainly you can use baobab seeds and also Combretum molly seeds. And these are the plants that are indigenous to Africa. For sugar, we can have honey. So it is important that we keep bee honey, or honey bee the right way. Honey bees, so that we manage to collecting honey from these bees that can provide sugar for the family instead of buying the processed sugar. So the indigenous food, we have them in our communities. Indigenous food are available, are the plants that are growing in our own community, and there are a wide variety of these plants, but we need to have a good selection of these plants so that we know where to plant them, you know how to process them, how to eat them. We need to know the importance of these plants. So it is important again to group them, to make a checklist of these plants and say, these are the plants that I need that are indigenous, and grow them in your own garden. And when you grow them in your own garden, you are growing them for a specific purpose. With this talk, we are going to share a list of the plants that I have mentioned, and these plants, how you can actually grow them and how to use them. And thank you.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vishwas Satka. I'm an academic at WITS. I work on emancipatory futures and alternatives. I also chair the board of the Cooperative and Policy Alternatives Center, and I'm a co-founder and activist in the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign. The struggle to defend and advance the commons is a global struggle, but it's also been a struggle that we have been engaged in South Africa at the front lines through the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign. It's a struggle that has also been about defining what does food sovereignty mean in the South African context. And this means, what is the relationship between the commons and food sovereignty? So let's start off with trying to just unpack this idea of the commons. The commons really is about a life-enabling resource which is self-managed by a collective. This could be a community, it could be a group of people, it could be an indigenous community, and so on. It's about a historical relationship between us and nature more generally. Individuals are not free-floating. They are not islands in themselves. We are socio-ecological beings. We are dependent, we are interconnected, and we are part of systems. Now, in terms of life-enabling resources, think about water. And here, think about oceans, think about rivers, think about aquifers. These are very, very important life-enabling resources. Think about soil and land. Think about biodiversity, flora, fauna, animals, and plants. Think about the Earth system, okay? The biosphere, the cryosphere, the poles, and so on. Think about knowledge. Think about the creative capacity to work and the digital sphere. These are all life-enabling resources. Commoning is also about a practice of reproducing and producing the commons of abundance to ensure that we can live. So it's not a technical thing. It's about our quality of life. It's about how we meet our needs. There are different forms of the commons. So you take a soup kitchen, for example, where people come together, they have a need for food, and they organize themselves. And there's a set of rules that informs that process, etc. Take a community library. You join as a member, and there's a set of rules for borrowing from the collection of books, reading, using, and bringing that back. Take Wikipedia, which is online, where you have this treasure trove of knowledge and information. It's built up by everybody who goes there and adds to this knowledge commons. Think about a community garden where you come together and you farm together and you share what comes out of that garden. Think about a public park, walking in that park, exercising in that park, having a picnic in that park, and so on. Those are ways in which you're producing and reproducing the commons. A farming cooperative where you pool your skills, your creative capacity to labor, and you engage in food production. Now there are rules there that governs this and so on, and you get on with it. The commons is also about affirming values and principles of sharing, caring, reciprocity, trust, solidarity, cooperation, rights, collective learning, and innovation. This is very, very different from the greedy, competitive, individualistic human being. Okay. So the commons prompts us to really think about who we are as human beings. How do we want to reproduce our lives? How do we want to be in our relationship with each other? And how do we want to be in our relationship with nature more generally? We are now facing the last struggle to defend and advance the commons on planet Earth. Capitalism began by creating labor as a commodity and destroying the commons, starting a process of destruction of the commons, what was called the enclosures. It was all about private property so that individuals could own and control resources versus the commons. There have been historical waves of destruction of the commons in the global south, starting off with the dispossessions of colonialism, and then, of course, neo-colonialism, and now imperial globalization. The Green Revolution that emerged in the 60s and 70s, together with food security discourses, are also implicated in a commodity-based food regime and destroying the commons on a planetary scale. This has been intensified with the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and intellectual property regimes that have engendered practices of biopiracy, where corporations can steal the indigenous knowledge and life-enabling resources of communities, particularly in the global south. It's in this context that La Via Campesina called for food sovereignty and a different framework for us to reclaim and defend the commons. If you look at an important report that came out last year by the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, it sounds a very scary alarm bell. We have shaped and impacted on almost 70% of land surface area on planet Earth. The extinction rate of species is just mind-boggling. We are killing thousands and thousands of species on planet Earth, and it's accelerating, which is what is scary. So all of this is part of the commons. If you look at the Amazon and the destruction of the Amazon, the fires that are still raging there now, so that cattle ranching can continue, so that fast food hamburgers can be made for people, mining and illegal logging and so on. This is the frontiers of the last struggle to defend and advance the commons. If we destroy the commons, we destroy ourselves. So in South Africa, through the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign, we've been advancing a vision for society and for a food sovereignty system based on commoning. If you read the Climate Justice Charter, front and center is the idea of the commons. It's about rethinking what it means to be human today, between ourselves and in our larger relationships in nature. The Food Sovereignty Act does the same in terms of the building blocks of an alternative food system. And so commoning is very, very crucial to how we are thinking about food sovereignty in South Africa. At a practical level, what does this mean? Well, it means how we build pathways to feed our communities, villages, towns, and cities, to affirm the right to food. It means that we can control our food systems to ensure healthy and nutritious food for all. It means that food is not a need. Food is a need, but not a commodity to make profit. So for us, if you engage in the act of setting up a garden and engage in an act of ensuring that local resources are mobilized to feed your community, and you build on this and you knock on the knowledge, you share the knowledge, etc. So there are many, many gardens in your community. There are many, many attempts to provide food and so on. You are building the food commons in your community, but you're also building a food system which you can control. So seeds are at the heart of food systems. Whoever controls the seeds controls the food system. Seeds are important for biodiversity. Seeds are very, very important for ensuring you can control the reproduction of a food sovereignty system. So in that context, we've developed this activist tool so that people can engage in seed banking and seed sharing and passing the knowledge and culture that goes with seeds and the seeds commons. So as you set up your garden, as you go down this road with us, think about how you're going to start sharing, saving, and ensuring that seeds circulate. The idea of a seed bank is a commons idea where everybody can store their seeds in this bank. They can borrow from this bank and enhance this bank with more seeds coming in and so on. Very, very important. It also is an attempt to challenge the global power structure and including the kinds of regulations and laws that are passed in South Africa that undermine the seed commons and put the seeds in private hands rather than in our hands. The other very important part of commoning in terms of food sovereignty is land sovereignty. And we all know and understand that we have come out of a history of dispossession of the land commons. Going back to early colonialism and its genocides, frontier wars, the 1913 Land Act and apartheid, and the whole modernization of industrial agriculture is based on dispossessing the land commons from the majority of the people. And yes, we want land justice in that context. But however, we cannot ignore the fact that there's land all around us, and we can start building the food sovereignty system and the food commons now in our backyards, in our pavements, in our communities, and so on. And this is what this training program is all about. So we really want to also appeal to you as you develop your gardens, etc., to place it on the food commons map so that we can demonstrate that there is another food system out there. And so please go on and log on your details and let's build this map together. It inspires the imagination. It will inspire other people. They will learn from your example and so on. The other important issue is water sovereignty and commoning. And now water in South Africa is a very, very precious life-enabling resource. Farmers, industrial farmers, control almost 62% of our water resources. We have very limited amounts of water available to share. So the more mines you put on stream, they have to share in about 2% of water that's available. The more industrial farms you put on stream, they have to share in a limited amount of resources. So the water in our rivers, in our boreholes, in our oceans, all of this is part of the water commons. And we've got to protect the water commons. In South Africa, we have water inequalities. 54% of households do not have access to clean drinking water through a tap. And so this clashes right now with our crisis around COVID-19, where people cannot meet their living needs, but also cannot keep hygienic in the context of fighting COVID-19. So this is why we did a water stress map and are challenging government around people's water needs. But we need to claim our rights to ensure that water is a commons, it's a public good, and it's there to meet everybody's needs. And then, of course, our creative capacity to work comes through in how we institutionalize solidarity through worker cooperatives, consumer cooperatives, etc. And so this is something in which we pool our capacities, our skills, our abilities, and we can meet our needs together. And this activist tool helps you think about how to do that. So commoning in practice for us, one example is our Wits Food Sovereignty Center, where we've set up about 6 agroecology gardens. We have a space in which there's a communal kitchen and the students that don't have enough food can come in there and they can cook and prepare their own food and do it in a culturally exciting way for themselves. We also have a farmers market regularly on a monthly basis, and the farmers don't come there to make money. This is about them bringing and pricing their food in a way that meets their needs and the needs of those who buy from them. So they actually sell cheaper than even the supermarkets. So this is what it means that food is not a commodity just to make profits. It's about meeting people's needs. So this is commoning in practice. And here again is the Knowledge Commons. All of these tools are available to you. Download them, use them, read them, run workshops in your communities, and so on, and build the Knowledge Commons. Most importantly, be safe as you set up your gardens in your home and in your community.
Wow, thank you for all those great inputs. I see that John, Vish, and Method are here with us. If you could turn on your cameras and your mics when it's your time to speak. Thanks. Hi, John. There's Method.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Method.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, John. Vish, are you joining us with your camera? Okay. Okay, so Vish has just left a comment. He was with us, but he has to join another meeting now, so he won't be able to answer any questions. But if you do have any questions, you can email Vish or you can email me and we'll try answer your questions. So then to John and Method, there haven't been too many questions, but if anyone else wants to write any questions in the chat, please drop them there. We've got a little bit of time for a bit of a discussion. So the first question which has come up twice is, how can people access these seeds that you've been talking about? I know, John, you've got a number of them in your garden. Method as well. Method, you do quite a bit of work in South Africa and in Africa trying to revive these seeds. So yeah, if you can tell us how people living in various parts of South Africa can actually access these seeds so they can grow them in their backyards or in their farms. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I can go first. Basically, we have quite a number of organizations that are or private companies that are running seed banks. One in Midrand, I have a small seed bank. Also, I have friends within Midrand that are also having traditional seeds, and they have their own seed bank. In communities that we are working in partnership with SKI in Limpopo, Venda, the guys I have some seed bank and they have a wide variety of seeds. Only what we can work out is the quantities that are required. We are not keeping volumes like tons of seeds. We are keeping small quantities to save the communities whom we are working with. So basically, variety of seeds, wide variety of seeds are there, but in small quantities. That's what I can say.
Thanks, John. And Method?
Yeah, I think the same response from John applies in my case as well. But also just to say that depending on where the person needing the seeds actually is, we could also refer them to certain farmers in the places where the farmers actually are. Like, I mean, in our case, we could refer some people to Elukwatini in Mpumalanga, South Africa, where we work. In the case of Zimbabwe, we could also refer them to, Bikita, where we work. But not only there, as John has said, that it's a big network of organizations and farmers working together. So depending on where somebody is, we could refer them to somebody, a farmer or an organization that's working within the vicinity. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, John and Method. So the seeds are available. We just need to find out where they are. So if anyone does want to access some seeds, you can drop me an email, send us a message on Facebook, and we will get in touch with Method and John to try and find out where the closest site for seeds, for you to access seeds is. We've got another question, John, to you. Two questions. So how do you ferment the red or yellow maize meal to use as pup to benefit from the microbes? And then someone also asked if they can come learn from you in your garden in Midrand.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. You are available. If you are available, we are available as well to come and learn from what we are doing in Midrand. We are in Glen Austin, 158 Allen Road. For fermentation, usually after grinding the maize, and then you have meal, you take for example, half kg of meal, you put in a 1 liter or 2 liter container of water, and then you leave it for 2 days, 3 days. It starts to ferment. Then you use that to cook, to prepare your porridge or to prepare your pap. It's probably for a pap is the start pack or for preparing pap. And then you can add unfermented meal into the pap to make it thicker. But basically, it's you keep a container with water with the meal in it, and then it ferments. As it ferments, you take a bit, you use it for cooking. That's what I do, and it has lots of microbes, and this is what we need for health living.
Great, thank you, John. It looks like we've gone through all the questions. Some people have asked about where we can access the resources, and you can go to the SAFC website. Wait, there's another question. Pam has said seeds are critical for preserving Indigenous knowledge systems. Where's that gone? Okay, now there's a lot of comments coming in. Trying to find that comment again. In your experience to support community gardens, does it work better to provide seeds or seedlings to communities? So I guess that question is to both of you.
Basically, in the communities we are working with, there are seeds already. So it's about, in our system, we have a system called the Center of Excellence or the node system, where we identify in the community who has some seeds, who is practicing farming. And we work around that person and expand to clusters. The cluster that helps this person and others to develop or to multiply seeds and share seeds within their own community. If they do not have a particular seed in an area, that's where we source from others, and we encourage them to do what we call knowledge sharing, either event for expos, event for seed sharing, where they can meet other communities or they can visit other communities to access different kind of seeds they require. And there are abundance of seeds in our communities. It's just a question of how do we access them, how do you work with farmers, and then you can get all what you need from farmers. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Method?
Yeah, perhaps just to add to that, the idea that, you know, if someone as a farmer feels that they have revived this particular seed by themselves, they will protect it. And so we find that where farmers have participated in learning exchanges, and in those processes, they got some seeds through exchanging with other farmers and so on. They will protect that like gold. It's very precious to them. Rather, or as opposed to a scheme where it has been distributed, maybe, you know, like as a wholesale donation. One would think that they will get another donation if this one is lost. It doesn't carry the same weight and the same affection to the farmer. So I just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Method. And then we've got some questions. Getting in touch with John and Method, you can, as I said, you can email me. If you signed up for Zoom, you would have received my email address, or you can send us a message on Facebook and we will pass on contacts. Then we've got someone who's asking, how is this information that has been shared today, so all the information on Indigenous knowledge and seed, how is it being documented? Are any of you documenting that knowledge?
Okay, we from our side we can say information has been documented and some information is not documented. We are always working with farmers and document within our organizations. We haven't document to share to the basically to the public or to the academics, but mainly we have information with the groups, with the communities we work with, and there's quite a lot of information that yeah, we need resources to do the proper documentation, and that's what I think will help the country and the continent to understand what we have on the ground.
Method?
Yeah, and to just add on to what John has said, that we do some basic documentation about some interesting things as they happen in the field. But as John has already indicated, that there is a lot of information lying all over around, you know, indigenous seeds, around, you know, to do with agroecology also, and culture and all that. But I think what's critical would be more of the practice than the documenting. How do we enact that? Because what we experience is that most cultures are dying, and as they do so, the knowledge goes with that. Not because the knowledge is not documented, but the practice just disappears, because when people disconnect with the practice, they can't experience the goodness of it. So how do we get things into practice in such a way that people experience it and feel the goodness of it, and feel inspired to carry on the experience and the practice as well?
Yeah, just want to add on that as well, that information is there. For some of us we have more than 30 years working in this work, in the experience, we have 30 years experience working with farmers, on grassroots farmers. They've been keeping seeds. And I know some examples in Mpumalanga, I know some examples in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, Mozambique, whom people are actually have been keeping seeds for a long time. And even now, they are keeping seeds and they've been running these projects for their own, but because they are not much involved into the normal academic way, some of the work is not documented, or some people, they document and they run away with the information and it's not shared back to the community. And this is something that we need to trace and follow and put it together for sharing in the continent.
Thanks, John. And then we'll just take two last questions. So the one is a point, and then maybe you can touch on this if you want to add. Busi is saying that prevention of cross-pollination of indigenous maize seed with hybrid or GMO should be stressed, because in the villages, some farmers use the seeds that will spoil our indigenous ones. So have you seen cross-pollination, and how do you prevent that? And then the last question is, what is the best way to preserve seeds once a vegetable garden is established?
Yeah, cross-pollination, sometimes it's the choice of the farmers. They want the crops to cross-pollinate. And when they do that, we call it enhancement of seed. And it helps the certain seeds to be stronger in the system. But also, there are so many methods that you can do to separate the pollination. We can practice what we call staggering. You do not plant at the same time. You plant on different times. And you also need to network to communicate with the farmers or neighbors around who is growing what type of crop or maize in the neighborhood. And that's the commons that we are trying to say. With pollination, the bees can move from one field to another. But if people, they communicate and they talk together, like our cluster system, where we say the cluster members, they all know what somebody is planting. If he's planting yellow maize, probably at the same time, they all plant yellow maize. And then later they plant red maize to control the pollination. So basically it's a simple and a simple way of operating, but it's all about communicating with the farmers themselves. They communicate and they organize a way of controlling that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think John has the best answer there. I will not add anything.
Okay. Well, thank you. Is there any last words that each of you would want to say before we close about Indigenous knowledge, saving seeds?
Yeah. For me, I would like to say that we need to give a chance to communities. They've been practicing this agroecology and keeping seeds for centuries. And it has been happening before colonization, before industrial agriculture, but we tend to ignore that and tend to put the right hand to the industrial agriculture. And it is time now, either the NGOs or the government to support rural communities, because they are the ones that are providing at least 70% of the food we are enjoying every day. So let's put energy and resources to the rural communities and support the work they are doing in keeping seeds and also in practicing agroecological farming. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Method, anything to add?
Yeah, I think when we talk about indigenous knowledge, indigenous practice, traditional practices and culture and all that, it feels often very archaic stuff or stuff of the past. But what I would like to say in my closing remarks is that archaic part actually represents the time that humans were more conscious about how to live in harmony with their environment. And so they devised very clever ways in order to live appropriately in harmony with their environments. And we have lost that. In our modern days life, we have been disconnected from the understanding of how to live where we live in such a way that it's mutually enhancing for us who are living today and for those who will live after us. And so by referring to indigenous knowledge and practice, we are not saying that we are going back in time. We want to use the knowledge of the past, the experience of the past, to map our way today into the future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, John, Method, and also to Vish for your wonderful inputs. And just for reminding us about how important Indigenous knowledge and seed is, reminding us to acknowledge it and also to honor it and participate in it. So thank you for that. This is just a reminder that our next workshop is taking place next week, Wednesday. It will be on how to observe and maintain your food garden. Courtney will post a link in the comments for where you can register. And we'll also have an input at that workshop from BioWatch, and they will talk to us about agroecology, practice and theory in South Africa. We will also send out the recordings of this workshop once it's uploaded onto YouTube, and it is presently, after this, it will be on Facebook. And once again, thank you to the panelists, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.